Hi everyone, Dr. Ranil Chaik here. Today I want to talk about the Tucker Carlson's interview with Mike Huckabee. I received a lot of questions about it and I wanted to answer them here. The interview is over 2 hours long. I do not recommend to listen to it. It is two grown-ups who have no idea what they're talking about, who confuse each other for over 2 hours. One part of the interview, I did want to answer. This is about the Abraham descendants paradigm combined with the genetic testing question. Carlson asks, Abraham descendants are the ones who have the right to this land? Yes, if so, let's do genetic testing, see who is who, and whoever is Abraham descendants would get the land. This idea is wrong on so many levels that we will talk about it in the next few minutes. And then I will analyze Huckabee's response. So, Carlson proposes that Abraham descendants are the ones who have the right to have this land. Yes, Huckabee agrees, then the idea of genetic testing. But first, let's see who Abraham descendants are. Abraham is from Ur. This is an area southern to Iraq. God tells him to go to the land of Canaan, and from there, he will inherit the entire region where Ur is just on the margins. This land is occupied by the many tribes, Canaanites, Kenizis, Canaanites, Amorites, and so on and so forth. It is not Abraham. It is of other people. Had it been of the land of Abraham, it didn't need to be promised to him, right? And the DNA of Abraham is not of this land. So neither would be his descendants. So there is no point testing people who already sit in these lands, how similar they are to Abraham, who is outside of this land. It is like promising Turkey to English and then asking English, do you look like Turks? No, they are not. Promising something to somebody does not change their DNA, and Abraham does not have the DNA of Canaan. Moreover, the land was promised to the descendants of Abraham. Abraham has 3 wives. Each wife had children. Those children had other children. Some of those are people with recognized geographical territories. Abraham had Sarah, of course, who had Isaac, who had Esav and Jacob. Esav is the father of Edomites, that Jordan. Jacob is the father of the 12 tribes. One of them is Judah. Sarah was Abraham's half-sister. She's also from Ur, so not local. Hagar was Egyptian, so also not local. And Keturah is of unknown region, but judging by her children, Midian and Shush and others, she's most likely from the Levant. Okay, all these tribes and the people associate themselves with these tribes today are indeed within the boundaries of the Promised Land. So there is no point doing such a test to see who belongs where. They will receive confirmation that they are from this region, even without knowing the DNA of Abraham is. You do not have the DNA of Abraham. You cannot do such a genetic test. Okay, and not to mention, you also know what the land constitutes. As Carlson explained several times, the boundaries are unclear. The boundaries have changed over time. The land that was promised to Abraham is not the land that was promised to Moses, and is not the land that Joshua was asked to conquer. So God's opinion sort of changed over the time. Okay, we've cracked the human genome. No, you have not. Tucker Carlson is not on the human genome paper. Taking credit on work that you did not do is not cool. It is one thing if you're saying we beat a certain football team, if you're a supporter of that team or something, but it is hard to believe Tucker Carlson had any opinions on the human genome back in 2001 when he was a reporter for the CNN from the Middle East. Moreover, the human genome was never cracked. It didn't need to be cracked. It needed to be sequenced. It's the DNA structure that could have possibly be cracked in 1953 by Watson and Crick. More specifically, the DNA code, the one that converts from DNA to amino acids using the 64 codon. So that was also sort of cracked in 1966 by Nirenberg, Korler, and Hawley, but not the human genome. That was only had to be sequenced. There is a way, though, to test if one is related to the ancient populations of the Hurrians and Arameans who Abraham and Jacob relate to. We developed these tests in Ancient DNA Hub, where we're using ancient DNA from ancient populations who live in those regions, in this time of place, related to the patriarchs' stories, and anyone can take those tests and see to what degree their genome matches the genomes of Hurrians and Arameans. Now, you may ask, rightfully, why Jacob and Abraham, who are related to each other, relate to two different people, and the answer is because this is what the Bible says. The Bible is not always consistent, and whereas Abraham is from Ur, this is the land of Hurrians, Jacob states, I am Aramean. The website also has tests for the tribes of Judah and tribes of Israel before their exile, where one can take similar tests. And our users already know very well these tribes are heterogeneous, of different origins. So the idea that they all came from the same forefather is not supported. Not by the ancient DNA data, not by the modern DNA data. Modern Jews have different haplogroups, both maternal and paternal, and no modern populations has come from one origin where all the population has the same haplogroup. This is not happening. This is quite surprising, as both people claim they repeatedly read the Bible, which does not strike me as true. Huckabee responds to this strange idea, saying, "I have no idea what this would prove. I mean, maybe it would be. Maybe it would be what? I have no idea what he means here." Carlson picks on that, and he says, "What do you mean? It was obviously prove whoever I'm descendants are, whoever has right to the land by the theology that you yourself just explained." As I said before, neither of them has read the Bible very carefully. I'm very confused as to why you don't do that. We don't do that. And if you believe the theology you just explained to me, this is when Huckabee says that Israel, as far as is concerned, can have the entire region because it was promised to them. Once again, no, it was not. It was promised to all the descendants of Abraham, and as far as we understand it, they're pretty much sitting where they are. So it's all good and well. We don't need genetic testing that are with made-up characters, and the whole idea is nonsense. But Huckabee, who sees himself as the U.S. Future president, he already ran twice, so obviously he thinks he has the talent to handle much more serious questions beyond history and genetic of Jews. Felt he came short in this interview, and for very good reasons. So he posted this long post on Twitter, sort of picking it up where he failed before. When I sit down with Carl Tuckson, I was expecting a thoughtful conversation. I don't know why you would expect that. Tucker Carlson repeatedly attacked Israel and spreading fake news, which is why he keeps being fired from jobs. So I don't know why you would expect to have a thoughtful conversation. That's the opposite of what you should have expected based on this guy's history. I wasn't anticipating that a lengthy series of questions where he seemed to be insinuating that the Jews of today aren't really same people as the Jews of the Bible. Once again, that's another way of saying you came unprepared to an interview because there are so many things to say about Jews, and that's one of the most common accusations. You're not who you say you are. There is no such thing as Jews of the Bible. Okay, Jews came up after the Bible. But point taken. The idea who is a Jew came only after the Babylonian exile. This is when the Bible stopped being written. The term Jew appears in the book of Jeremiah, but it is appear more of a nickname, more of a name of somebody, rather than a description of that individual, more than an adjective. That did not come up until the book of Esther. We don't know who wrote it. We don't know where they wrote it. We don't know who ordered the book to be written, but there it is mentioned there was a Jew, so a description of a person, okay? And that came only after Hebrew text was translated into Greek, and the Greeks used that word Yehudi, okay? I did not think to say to Carlson, which is that Ashkenazi Jews, meaning those whose families had spent centuries in Europe. That is not true. Both Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews spent centuries in Europe. Ashkenazi Jews are supposedly a minority of Jewish population today, about 35 or 40%. I don't know where Huckabee gets his statistics, but these numbers are not supported. Those statistics are not being collected anymore because we're now several generations after the people arrived to Israel, and it's very difficult to calculate. What we usually collect is first generation, second generation, and so forth. This book, Stratification in Higher Education, states that 25% of the families are of mixed marriages from multiple Jewish diaspora. So the rest of the 75% can somehow still trace back their origin. But even if you can, it is unclear from these percentages Huckabee provided if Russian Jews, who are sizable minority of the population, should we call them, are they counted as Ashkenazi or not? Moreover, in this map that you can see, Jews diaspora in Europe, you can see that there is a sizable majority of Jews in Eastern Europe. These should not be counted as Ashkenazi Jews. They're not Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenazi Jews are only the ones from Germany. What happens when all these Jews came to Israel, these Jews from Eastern Europe were called Ostenjuden, okay, Jews of the East. And they felt inferior compared to the Germanic Jews who were educated and literate and had much more famous rabbis than the ones in the East had because they were oppressed by the Soviet Union. They only The only time that they call themselves Ashkenazi Jews is when they realize there is even more Eastern Jews than they are, and these are the Mesopotamian Jews, who are by no means uneducated, of course, but nonetheless they were not European, and the Europeans were the one who were the founder of the country. So they put themselves in the circle of Ashkenazi Jews, and since then they've been counting as such. The same process happened with the Sephardic Jews. Today Sephardic Jews are not from Spain. No living Jew can claim he was from Spain. The Jewish from Spain were expulted at the end of the 15th century, and Moroccan Jews and all the other ones calling themselves Sephardic Jews are following the ways of praying, not the geography. Okay, so this is about that. There is a good reason, as it turned out, that I had never encountered this theory that Tucker kept pushing on. It's because it comes from some of the darkest realm of the internet and social media. Huckabee finds an excuse to be ignorant because this theory is coming from the darkest realm of the internet. No, this theory has been known since the middle of the 10th century. A guy called Ibn Shaprut was the secretary and the leading Jewish poet in the Iberian Peninsula, and he did not hear about the Khazars either, but instead of blaming everybody else for his ignorance, he educated himself, which is what you should do, especially if you want to be the president, the most powerful person in the world. He wrote a letter to the Khazar king, and he asked them, he told him, merchants have told me that there is a kingdom of the Jews called Al-Khazar, the Khazar, right? He was speaking Arabic, so Al is there. And I did not believe it, because I thought they said this to please me. It was a cool thing to know that Jews have a kingdom. We're talking about people dispersed everywhere who suffer persecution, harassment, have to pay bribe just to survive. All of a sudden you hear that they have a kingdom. How cool is that? Okay, so he wrote this letter asking the king if this is true. Do you really have a king called Joseph? Yes, Jewish names. There was also Obadiah. The king responded to him. And these two letters are saved in of course, the most pedophilic and darkest place in the universe, where dogs and cats live together and satanistic mice are ruling them. It's called the Library of Cambridge, and anybody can go there and see those letters written. Of course, this information has been weaponized by a lot of very bad people, anti-Semite, huge one. One of them is Yehuda Halevi. He wrote the book, The Kuzari. Yehuda Halevi was a philosopher. He was a poet. He was a thinker, unlike some people who referred to in this video. He wrote a debate between the Khazari and another person, sort of like these two gentlemen we're talking about, except one of they're two intelligent people asking each other questions: what is right, what is wrong, the nature of God, the nature of faith, and the goal is to convince the Khazar king that Judaism satisfies all his criteria. There are many more anti-Semitic people who promoted this theory and discussed it and mentioned it. One of them is a huge anti-Semite, of course, Rabbi Patachiah Rosenberg. Just like Benjamin of Tudela, he traveled around the world and recorded stories and events that he witnessed or people told him, and he mentioned the Khazar king. Isaac Jost was a scholar. Henry Goretz, huge anti-Semite, one of the biggest one you could ever hear of. He hated Jews. He hated them so much that he wrote the first history of the Jewish people, the first since the time of Josephus Flavius. That's like over 1,000 years ago. And he wrote that. Okay? And that's just Western Europe. Moving on to Eastern Europe. Grigoriev wrote about the Khazar. Joseph Pearl was a bit skeptic about them, but the conversion, but he mentioned them. Avraham Harkevi, once again, huge anti-Semite. He wrote an amazing book about the Jews and the Khazars. It's called The Jews and the Language of the Khazars. Simon Dubno, another huge anti-Semite, wrote the history of the books where the Khazars are mentioned. Yitzhak Schiffer, Salo Baron, one of the most famous Jewish historians, huge anti-Semite, of course. Ben Zion Dinur, who hated Jews, who hated Israel, hated everybody so much that he not only wrote the history of Jews, he also became a minister of education in Israel. And then we have Abraham Polak, who's a scholar of history, and he wrote a book in Hebrew only. Unfortunately, it's called Khazaria. Dunlop was a British scholar. He wrote a book, The History of the Jewish Khazars. And we have Peter Golden, who wrote extensively about Khazars and their languages. We have Arthur Koestler, who was a journalist. He wrote the famous book in 1976, The 13th Tribe, and popularized this theory of Khazars. Then, of course, we have Yitzhak Shifrut, Yitzhak Be'er Levinson, all of them very well-established anti-Semites. And I will not continue here because the full list appears in the book of Shlomo Sanz, full list of Jewish scholar. This list does no justice to all the Arab historians and Arab geographers, who are, of course, the only people worth listening to in the Middle Ages, who wrote about Khazaria. Lots of Russian scholars covered it, and many other people. Of course, they're all anti-Semites to Huckabee and the likes, except that they're not. None of them wanted to delegitimize and Jews and strip them of their history. That's exactly the opposite. Jews had no history. No history was written since the time of Josephus Flavius. Okay, Jews are people without history. All these people try to give the Jews history. So once again, Huckabee has no idea what he's talking about. Okay, not to delegitimize, but to legitimize. Once you have a history, you're legitimate. You're people. You can make connections with your past. You can build genealogy. These are the kind of things that give you legitimacy. Okay. Now, what is more correct to say about the Khazar theory is that it fell out of fashion. When did it happen? Between the 50s and the 60s, when Israel occupied a huge chunk of land in Israel, pushing away the Palestinians, Bedouins, other populations, and they needed to legitimize claims to the land. At this point, it became clear that to Christian messianic ears, such as those of Huckabee, making claims that going back to the Bible is far more useful than to say, we need this land, and we would feel much more comfortable if those people would go somewhere else. Okay, and this is why the Khazar theory has been pushed away from the history books. Not because it is incorrect, not because it's not exciting, not because it's not accurate, but for political reasons that at that time sounded more convincing than they are now. Now they're just not needed anymore. Okay, Peter Golden and other scholars wrote this book, The World of the Khazars, which was published in the most anti-Semitic, pedophilic, Satan worshipper place in Jerusalem in 1999. You can find it on Amazon. It's an excellent book with a lot of scholarly essays about the Khazars. And then, of course, yes, it really caught fire in recent years on the internet and social media, mostly some over anti-Semites and Jew hatred you can find. Right. I assume he means my studies, because in terms of scholarly work, my work on the genetics of the Jews is the one most cited on the internet. So this refers to these 3 studies. The top one is from 2013, so over 10 years ago. The youngest one is from 2017, and they're all ranked number 1 most read papers in their respective journals. I thank everyone who cite them. I wish you would cite them more accurately. I would be specifically grateful if you'd give links to those studies so that other people can read them, and I will get a few more banana points, but you don't have to. I don't know why Tucker was so fixated on it. I know it's because he found weakness in your statements, and he found areas where you have no idea what he's talking about, and he keeps being fixated on it like a good journalist. It's not difficult to guess. I'm certainly not saying he knew the origin of the conspiracy theory. I'm not saying that either. I don't know what's his heart or what he was thinking. I do. It's not difficult to guess, but let's move on. But I do know that the discussed idea that Ashkenazi or European Jews descend from the ancient Turkic kingdom of Khazars is bunk. It's also been weaponized by people who are trying to delegitimize Jews. Yes. So everybody hates us. Let's move on to the science. This is my study from 2017. The top figure summarizes 4 studies that attempted to trace the geographical origins of Ashkenazi Jews. So you have the Behar study here, which used PCA, not a very accurate method, which is why he's so off. That's still Turkey. And then you have my studies that use the geographic population structure, GPS. This is the most one and only biogeographical tool in genetic studies. And you can see how nicely they're all clustering here around these 4 ancient villages: Iskenaz, Eskenaz, Ashenaz, and Ashkuz. 4 toponyms whose name derived from the word Ashkenaz, all of them in the same place. This is right on the trade routes of the ancient world. This is where the genome of Ashkenazi Jews map to. This entire region is historically known as Ashkenaz land. It is unclear when Jews originated there, and when did they leave it there. And these are 2 important questions, because from here, Jews could have entered Europe in 2 ways, either through here or from the north, from the Khazarian kingdom. And my guess is they probably went both ways. Hence the support to the Khazarian hypothesis. The lower figures shows you the ancient ancestry of Ashkenazi Jews and people of the Middle East with respect to these 4 ancestral population: Eastern hunter-gatherers, Anatolian, Levantines, and Iranian. You can see Ashkenazi Jews derived their ancestry mostly from Iranians. And when I say Iranians, you can see it goes all the way up here. Turks and Iranians are very closely related populations, with just a little bit of Eastern hunter-gatherers. And you can see the huge heterogeneity of Ashkenazi Jews. No scholar who studies Ashkenazi Jews can claim they're from the same origin. They have different haplogroups, both maternal and paternal, and look at this huge diversity here. Okay, whereas the other populations have a stronger Levantine origin. I'm not funded by the State Department or from the Khazars who are telling me what to say, as opposed to some other people. But this study has been cited 700,000 times. For humble scholar, this is a lot. Moving forward, the audacious conspiracy theories peddled by likes of Kendall's Owens, no idea who that is, and Nick something, no idea who that is either, who love David Duke, as well as Islamist accounts, and again, once again, everybody hates us. Here's the deal. Both stark supporters of Jews and those who hate them have one thing in common. They both believe Jews are a race. Why? For two different reasons. Those who like Jews and wants to support claims believe Jews are a race, to connect them to the Bible, to support this idea that Carlson has just challenged. And they want Jews to have the land. Like Huckabee says, Jews can have everything. Fine. Those who hate Jews find it a lot easier to hate Jews as a race with mischievous nature and satanistic plan to do bad things. But Jews are not a race. It's very clear from the genetic data and from everything that we know, and from just looking at them. And it is important to denounce these ideas that belong to the 1940s Central Europe, as well as other places. Okay, we moved away from these ideas because we saw what happened, but now these ideas are coming back to for political reasons. Moving on. But we know from genetics and rich volumes of written literature that the Jews of today can trace their lineage back thousands of years to Israel and to the Jewish people of the Bible. No, we don't. The only way you can trace back Jews to Israel, and we already spoke about there is no such thing as Jewish people of the Bible, is using a biogeographical tool. Biogeographical tool has one thing that it's doing. It converts DNA information into geographical coordinates. There's only one tool that does it right. That's the GPS. This is what you see here on the map. PCA cannot do it, but people claim it can do it. But this is the outcome. You're far off from the true location, which is right here. Okay, there are no volumes of written literature that Jews of today can trace their lineage back thousands of years. You have huge discontinuity. Genealogy never goes back more than 500 years. It's not happening. This is when the paper trace is lost. Okay, and 500 years is in the best case. Okay, you cannot go back 3,300 years. Huckabee at some point claims Jews were dispersed among the nations. This is Christian mythology. The idea is that they were dispersed among the nation as a punishment for their sin. What is that sin? Not accepting Christianity, of course. Okay, that never happened. Jews were never dispersed among the nations. There is no time and place and a force powerful enough to take hundreds and thousands and millions of people and scatter them around. Okay, this never happened. What did happen is that you do have huge Jewish population in Eastern Europe all of a sudden coming up in the 19th century that nobody would know where they came from. The only way to explain this growth in Jewish population is by contribution from the Khazars. That's very simple math. They are as connected together as genetic tells us that the ancient Khazars kingdom is to the Jews living today in Turkey. Well, there is no DNA of Khazars, so we don't know how close they are to the Turks. They would not be as close to the Turks as they are to other people who live in the Caucasus region today, which is why they are much better proxies for the Khazars. And Jews today are not all connected together. Jews from Ethiopia are not connected together to the Jews from ancient Ashkenaz or modern Ashkenaz, or that's Germany. They're simply not. If you make big circle around all the Jews today, you'll get a very high genetic diversity, which is why some Jews are being excluded from this circle. Now, who decides who to exclude who? That's, of course, whoever writes the study. And that's also one thing that is unpleasant and uncool to talk about. But what is also uncool is to say that they're all connected together, as genetic tells us. Genetic tells us they're actually not connected to. Okay. And if Tucker wants to tour more than the Ben Gurion airport, where apparently he made false complaints that he was detained or asked questions like every person is, I can take him to the time of Jesus and what that has to do with anything, I have no idea. But a Messianic Christian has to say Jesus every now and then, so this is that. I sincerely hope Tucker would let me know when he actually wants to learn facts about the land and the people. I really hope he will not. This was not a pleasant experience to watch this interview of yours. I strongly suggest neither of you should deal with questions of Jews' history and genetics. You're not suitable for that. Please stay within your own field. Thank you for watching. I hope it was educational.